Are video games boring today, or are you boring? My argument is that you are boring. Well, if you like my channel, you're probably a fun guy like me, but seriously, right? I have seen this for the last 1 or 2 weeks now. People complain that, oh, this year is boring, this season of gaming is boring, whatever. I think this is one of the best years in a long time. I said it in my old Baldur's Gate video. We had Baldur's Gate 3, right? We had Starfield before that, FF16, Zelda, Octopath Traveler 2, yada yada 76. It's like, well, yeah, this year is great, man. I think the reason is people complaining about is because they play the wrong games, okay? So I've been a video game developer for many years, of course, a designer, and I have never have I gotten bored by video games. When I get off work, I go home to play more games. And I think that actually is not actually that common, right? And I never ever get bored of video games. And I really play the correct games. And I want to come back to this thing that my motto has always been gameplay over graphics, or gameplay over anything, right? So every video you guys subscribe, slide button right, I do a few, gaming videos per week, right? And I want to look at this thing because I do see this a lot, okay? Especially people in my age, right? I'm an old man, and most of my friends and colleagues so on, they complain about, oh yeah, I don't like games anymore. They're like, I play an hour every day after work, and it's kind of meh, right? I don't feel it, When I get back home, after work, and I play a video game, I enjoy it, okay? I enjoy every goddamn second of it, right? I never felt that this game is kind of boring, right? And I really think it's because I play good games, okay? But I want to explain what I mean here, because I think a lot of people are stuck in this loop, right? We're going to talk about it soon here. And also stuck in the graphics. So you can have two different main issues. But I want to say again, just before going into my two main points, is that I think people are very silly, right? Complaining about this year. This year is great. I think it's much better than last year. I already made one video about that, but it's very, very briefly, right? We have the Zelda, Street Fighter, FF16, right? Baldur's Gate, etc. This game has been great, okay? So I don't know what people are talking about. I felt I had like one, maybe even two really good games, like almost every month this year. So I have no idea what you're talking about in general. This game is called Unicorn Overlord. And the reason I'm bringing up it here, because this game to me is right. Yesterday was announced in Nintendo Direct. And some more games I like too. The PS games too. But the game that I liked the most was the this game. Right? Of course, it's kind of my bias, but I like strategy games. I love Ogre Battle. That's Ogre's alright. This was Ogre Battle to me. So this game is like, woo, And I'm a big fan of Sentinel Aegis, right? The same developer. But seriously, this game to me immediately stands out as, a game with, tech, min-maxing, right? Strategy game. Definitely not like graphical game, right? Even though I think that Vanilla Bear games looks great, it's like a sprite game, whatever. So it's like, okay, this is clearly a gameplay game, right? For example, I really think Aegis 13 is a great video game, right? It's a great storytelling game, very good storyline, interesting characters, right? But clearly that game is like a 2D game, right? So it's never gonna win, Game of the Year, because it looks fugly, I mean, I think it is beautiful from a sprite standpoint, but obviously it's never gonna be a popular mainstream game. And I think that's obviously a little sad, right? But this to me is by far the most interesting game in the Nintendo Direct, definitely. But, it's one of the games I like as well. And honestly, I still definitely own way more Switch games than I own PS5 game. Maybe PS4, but because they're mostly gameplay-focused games. But I guess my main point is that I love these games here, because I mean, this is a gameplay. This is a gameplay over, story or whatever, or over, graphics or whatever. Yeah, this is Overlord to me. It's very interesting because it's a gameplay game, right? And that's what you actually should play mostly. Now, let's go to one of my main points, right? Core gameplay loop, stuck in the boring mode of card, right? So first of all, I made a video about Diablo 4 this year. Put that again here. I'm very, very disappointed, right? That you have the 5 exact same classes I've seen before, right? Very boring to me. Nothing to experiment with, I just feel it's so lame and boring. When I worked in the third game, right? We had some new classes, which and so on. I must say that Diablo 3 was the most innovative game ever, right? But clearly Diablo 4 is a coward's game, where the developers are like, okay, you just take everything the same thing, right? It reminds me of Star Wars 7, A New Hope 2, hated that movie. I think the movie was terrible, right? There's a very, very good clip from George Lucas where he says like, well, at least I tried something new, right? And I really agree with George Lucas. I actually massively prefer Star Wars Episode 1 over 7, okay? And I know that might be crazy, but I do, because the 7, he says, it's just 4 again, right, It is so covered, it's just 4 again. What's the point of the movie, right? When I watched the first movie, at least I get something different, right? Star! Yeah, now this is pod racing, yeah, but it has something different, I guess something different, right? I hated the 7th movie, and obviously 8 and 9 are also terrible, so yeah, they're covered movie, right? Diablo 4 is a covered video game, where you just make the exact same thing again, right? But my main issue, or actually, rather not my main issue, but your issue perhaps, right? Are you stuck in the core gameplay loop? Because I have a lot of friends and colleagues, right, that still play Diablo 4. And they come to me, during the last play and it's like, oh, I mean, maybe I'm old, they can afford that. Why do I keep playing Diablo 4? It's kind of boring, And they then tell me that they believe that they're too old to play video games, that they can outgrow it. And I look at them like, hey man, after work, every day, man, I get home and I freaking love it, man. I work with video games, I go home and I play more video games, and I play games like, like Baldur's Gate 3 now, right? I play Civ 6 and Armored Core 6, right? And I'm just like, I'm loving it, man. I want to go home and play more Armored Core 6. I enjoy it. Every stage is freaking fun. The boss fights, so on. I'm enjoying it. You're playing the wrong game. That's my point, right? But I do think that people, the reason they find it boring, right, is because too many people are playing these, again, core game loops, right? Diablo 4 isn't that super exciting to play, actually, right? And I want to stress this point here, right? Diablo 4 isn't a 0 out of 10 game, but it's basically being stuck in like a 6 out of 10 game, right? You're stuck in this like loot, grind, core loop, right? With roughly the same mechanics that you had when you were 12, right? Like my friends are 30, 40, yeah. It's like they're playing the game they played 20 years ago. It's roughly the same thing. So of course they get kind of bored by it. So they go home after work and they play for like 1-2 hours per day, right? And they kind of get in and they just play this core game loop. Now of course, like I said, Armored Core 6, it isn't the most innovative game ever. It's a mecha boss fighting game, right? But every boss is different, right? Every boss is kind of cool and it's very hard, right? So when I get home after work and I play this latest From Software game, I am truly enjoying it, right? Because I get a new boss fight, or this was hard, I died, I'm gonna make my sensitive mechs here, gonna try again, right? That's interesting. That's good for your brain, right? Instead of going home and just clicking the same thing over and over and over again. And I really do think people are stuck in these core gameplay loops, right? And for example, not just Diablo 4 of course, but most modern games, right, are obsessed with this thing, right? FF16, I like the game, absolutely. Biggest issue was the incredibly bad side quest, all these fetch quests, right? Terribly fetch quests, very MMORPG. You could remove them, and it's a better game, Yes, the game. I mean, you straight up remove all the bad side quests of FF16, and it's a better game. They didn't replace it. I had a shorter, better experience, right? Yeah, it's a better game. Terrible side quests in that game. Super dear, used to fed out the time, right? Very, terrible stuff. And generally speaking, right, it's that core loop. Oh, you have to do the flash quests again. Very, very, modern gaming. That's right. If you start playing these modern, basically core game loops, you're stuck in a loop, right? Gaming gets way more fun again. Interesting enough to put out there. I love games like Stardew Valley, so also very core loopy. But it's very different in those games because in those games, the actual core loop is the fun stuff, Like, you're not really playing Stardew Valley because, I guess you want to build a house or whatever, but you're not playing the core loop because you're like, oh, I need to get the gear or whatever, right? When you play like Diablo, it's like you're playing the same loop over and over and over again, trying to get a slightly better loot to get another core loop going on, like a slightly harder core loop. I don't know, it's a very different feel to it. It's kind of like, you're not, in Diablo 4, the enjoyment is actually getting that loot, right, It's getting to the actual goal, right? Where like Stardew Valley or Factorio or whatever, it's more the loop itself that's the fun. So I think it's a very different thing, right? It's a very different kind of gameplay, yeah, speaking. Those games are kind of like, meditative, I guess, or whatever. But most of modern gaming, again, AAA games, of course, mostly, but only, are stuck in, like, setting you up for this obsessive core loop, right? And that's also one reason, right, why I despise games like Zero Dawn and so on, right? I can barely play them, you know. I'm like, oh my god, it's boring. Comment that later, but I mean, mostly, right, it's core gameplay to me. It's so boring because you know how it is. You get to a desert and you have one battle camp, one dinosaur, one this thing, right? And then you get to the snowfield, and it's one battle camp. I mean, a lot of these, like, you know, 3D exploration-ish open world games, right? They have the exact same core loop, right? Over and over and over again. It's super boring to me. And you can argue that, for example, Armored Core earlier. Is Armored Core not the same thing? You get a stage and you get to a boss? No, it isn't. I mean, and technically, yes, the core loop is play a stage, meet a boss, kill the boss, right? The difference is every boss is different, though, right? In Zero Dawn, you barely have any bosses. Most it's like one area has the exact same, you know, layout, right? Or battle camp and so on. Each battle camp is slightly different, but it's mostly the exact same thing, right? You're basically doing the exact same thing like 7 times, right? At 7 different environments. But it's the exact same thing 7 times. Where in like a From Software game, you're fighting a hard boss, right? You know, and yes, obviously, if you become very, very abstract, right? If it's on macro level, it's the same core loop. You know, get to a boss and fight it. Yeah, it's very basic, right? But of course, on detail level, it's different because every boss is different, right? Of course, obviously, I know that you have the repeat bosses and so on, but I mean, at a core value, right? Okay, you get a new fight, right? So that's a game focused on gameplay, right? You know, where I feel a game like Zero Dawn is a game focused on, you know, just keeping you busy, right? It's like giving you padded out time. It's like Casimir F16 was like, well, you could just remove this terrible side quest. It's a better game, right? So I think it's very, very similar as well, where it's like a lot of shitty quests, right? You know, a lot of shitty stuff to collect or whatever. It's not even that interesting to do it. And compare something like, I don't know, Banjo-Kazooie, something like that, you know. Also a collectible game, right? But it's more interesting because it's a platform game, so collecting is actually more interesting and fun, right? But that's kind of the core of issue, right? More people I know at least, that say that they're too old to play video games today is because they play games that have mediocre or even bad core loops, where rarely is a fun gameplay, and it's too much about getting the loot or whatever, right? Instead of playing like fun games. That's the step I brought up earlier, Unicorn Overlord. I even haven't played the game yet, but I'm pretty sure when I see this stuff here, I know it looks, for some it looks boring. For me, I'm like, oh yeah, this game is gonna be mid-maxy, it's gonna be Excel sheet, it's gonna be freaking different classes. Like, I can see this being like, oh yeah, this looks like a fun game. You know what I mean? Like, for me, this looks fun, you know? It's like an interesting video game. This looks like a game that's focused on the gameplay, right? That's my point, of course. But honestly, you know, a little bit I feel saddened, right, you know? That so many people today are stuck with this, like, boring mid-games. And I think that if you bring it back to that Star Wars example, I think a major issue why we are like that, if I'm gonna be really negative here, is because just like with Star Wars, right, and with Diablo 4 and the classes, most of the biggest studios are so afraid of doing anything, so they kind of like, I just repeat the same loop they have in other games, right? Like, why should we make new gameplay? It's scary, right? It's scary, yeah? It's the same gameplay. Next issue, of course, of why people think that games today are boring is because they are boring, right? Many games today are actually really effing boring. Zero Dawn to me, I hate this game, guys. Like, I hate this game, seriously. This is like the worst. I think that, honestly, I think that Zero, Horizon Dawn 1, and even more so 2, it is like the worst part of video game industry today, right? Except Micro Hell and so on. Because this game has, like, insanely boring gameplay. Like, repetitive core gameplay, right? So that's really, really, I think it's terribly boring gameplay, this game. Terribly boring. However, it also is purely focused on graphics. This is like a video game where all the people think the game is good is because it looks pretty, right? You know, it's like all visual, no substance. Yeah, there's nothing beneath the surface, right? I think honestly, Zero Dawn to me is like a perfect example of insanely terrible modern games. I want to put it out again. I don't think that actually the modern games as a whole are bad, right? But I think there are very many examples, especially AAA games, where they focus too much on graphics over gameplay, right? and then also give you a terrible core gameplay, just like the loops and so on, right? So it's both like, oh my god, yeah, it's like the terrible boring camps followed by graphics. But anyway, let's talk about it more in a graphical sense, right? I think that it's very important to be, it's a natural progression to some extent, of course, because the better the engine gets, right? It's a PS5 game, of course, and PS4, but mostly a PS5 game, right? The better the games get, the prettier the games get, right? Honestly, if you're bored by video games right now, if you feel that the industry is boring or whatever, my tip to you is that stop buying these games, right? Stop buying these pretty games and go back and buying games that look like Uglier sprites. That's probably gonna be a better game for you. Probably, right? Yeah. I'm just kind of like, well, the uglier the game is, probably the better it is. I look at it differently. But honestly, I honestly think that's true, because think about it from a mental standpoint, right? If you're a game developer, like the last game I made, or the last game, but whatever. I made a game, it was 3 years in that game, right? That's a pretty ugly game, okay? It's all about gameplay, obviously. I mean, I'm the lead designer, so yeah. It's all about gameplay, right? Publishing a game that you know is ugly, so to speak, right? What are you doing that for? Well, you're doing it because you're believing in the game, but you're not believing in the graphics, right? That being said, put out there, my video game was terribly boring aesthetically, though. That was a bigger issue, in my opinion, that game. Terribly bad graphics. So yes, the graphic itself was pretty meh, right? But the bigger issue is the actual character design. Of course, the reason why you can look at all the videos, but of course, because I designed the characters, right, from the lore and how they look and so on, right? And then the graphic guy touched it, and the turn the vocals on, you know what I mean? But it was up to me, it would, they turn them flat, you know what I mean? You know what I mean? Whatever. I digress. But I think it's a big issue, right? That video games today are obviously driven by industry standards, right? Better and better graphics. So I do get it, alright. I do get it. But there is a big issue that the more we have increased our CPUs and GPUs and whatever, right? The more the developers are hiring. So for example, I worked in a video game where we had, let's see here, three developers, yeah. I don't count them myself here, okay? I was designer, right? But I also did code, but that don't count me then. So we had 3 developers that includes the CTO, okay? So you basically only have 2 full-time developers, right? But CTO also have more meetings, all right? And I also did some code, whatever, but I also like a game designer and also manager, so it's like maybe you in total have like 3 developers, okay? How many graphic artist people do you think we had? It was like over 10 people, okay? So we had like 9, I think, artists, graphic artists, right? And like 3 technical animators, okay? And then you had, let's see, like 2 audio guys. Then we had like 2 VFX, right? For that. You get my point. I can list, give my point. It's like 20, 30 people doing a lot of graphical stuff, right? And I guess audio is good there. All the visual stuff, right? And then you got like 2-3 people doing the code, Like, it's terrible! And that game ran like shit, okay? That game that game wasn't optimized, right? So there's also said, oh yeah, the game was great. It means laggy, right? It's the process, yeah, the optimization is terrible. I mean, my code wasn't even that good either, even though I did it. No, because it basically was that we were so understaffed, right? As on the technical side, right? So I was just like, well, I guess I will just implement stuff so it works, you know what I mean? So we can launch the game. But I'm telling the CEO, like, oh, it's not gonna be very good, though, because we have no time to do that, right? And obviously I told them, at every management meeting, I was like, can we hire more developers, please? Yeah, let's stop hiring artist people and hire more developers, okay? And they were like, nah, graphics sells. I was like, no, gameplay sells. Yeah. That game sold like nothing, okay? So I was right. The game was terrible. The game actually is pretty fun, but I mean, one reason that it definitely didn't sell that well was that it was just really poorly optimized, right? And that is a big part of the storyline. Why? Because, yeah, we had like, at best 4 developers, right? On like 50 people. That's ridiculous for few developers. So you can understand that, I mean, we had the manpower to make it run, you know what I mean? We didn't have the manpower to like optimize it. And actually, it got even worse because because there's so many graphic people on that developer, on that game, they were obsessed with graphics, right? So then you have developers, then you have the bosses being like, okay, but let's like make the one graphic guy can make extra VFX for snow or rain, and they have so many artists, right? So they're gonna make them do the cloud thing, and no, let's make like a more cloud, more rain effect and so on, right? Which makes it even harder to optimize. Okay, now you're like demanding even more from the CPU here. So it got even worse, because the more they hired graphic people, right, the more they threw in stupid graphical content that made the game, the FPS and so on. The frame just kept dropping. So yeah, like it would be easier to optimize it, right, with fewer graphic people, right, because fewer assets to optimize. Yeah, Jesus Christ, what a nightmare that was. But anyway, I hope my point is that, unfortunately, right, a lot of people in the industry are making too much focus on graphics, right? And today, though, the consumer also buys them, I guess, more. But I really do think, though, I'm gonna blame you guys out there in the world, but I really do think, though, right? For example, I like Pokemon still, right? Because I'm a weirdo. No, but I still like Pokemon. It's a great gameplay, right? Obviously, I very much, hate how, badly the code is, right? How incredibly buggy it is, right? Scarlet and Violet, incredibly buggy. Game Freak is terrible, developers, everyone knows that. But otherwise, the people play about graphics, right? I don't care about that. Right? People play about some, I don't know, some blinking or whatever, Who cares? Come on. What does it matter? Pokemon is fun to play, because it's Pokemon. It goes good gameplay, basic Pokemon. Yeah, that's the thing, Pokemon, right? Since day one, Pokemon has a great gameplay, right? You have a lot of different monsters to capture. You have the combos of monsters, right? You have different abilities in your Pokemon. But to my point, Pokemon is a great game because it's Pokemon, right? The actual core gameplay is still solid 30 years later, right? Who cares if it's like somewhat ugly or whatever, right? That has no effect. That being said, again, though, you just put out, of course, that is laggy and like the stuff is teleports out and crashes and so on. Obviously, that's terrible, obviously. So that's not terrible, right? But if Game Freak was better, that would be fine, right? All the bugs or whatever, right? But that obviously terrible. But I don't care if the Pokemon, or how the trainer looks or stuff like that. That being said, I do agree that it's kind of stupid that the trainer can't like remove their backpack or whatever. I mean, this is almost some low-hanging fruits in Pokemon. But I still think that, I would rather, and I also do as well, right? I would rather play Pokemon Scarlet and Violet 100 times more than Zero Dawn, right? I mean, this game obviously looks 1,000 times better, right? But the gameplay is boring. I mean, it's bored by it, right? I'd rather play Pokemon with some glitches and bugs and generally incredibly ugly game, right? But I actually am enjoying it, right? For the most part, I'm enjoying it. So I get a little bit annoyed by bugs or whatever, but I'm enjoying it, right? At the end of the day, right, I think that we're gonna have less focus on these things. I do think actually the industry will move slightly less into these AAA games, because it also gets more and more expensive to produce these like mega games, right? But also I do hope, though, like I'm with here, right? No, I don't think that games in general, in total, are boring today. I don't think that it ever becomes a time where you outgrow video gaming. Because I've never done that. Maybe I missed, but still, I never done it. I think the risk people outgrow, right, is like my colleagues, because they're playing these games. They're playing games like Zero Dawn that looks beautiful, right? But the actual gameplay is shit, right? Yeah. The core gameplay loop, terrible. The graphics are the only thing the game has going for it, right? Yeah. But there's no actual substance to it, right? Terrible core game loop, same thing over and over again. And actual, generally a bad game, right? And they're stuck in it. Yeah, they're stuck in that. It's like a visual, beautiful game with an incredibly bad gameplay, right? And these are the games they keep buying, and then they complain that they have outgrown video games. They buy their new game console, they play a few hours every day, and that's it, right? If you're like me instead and get really deep down into good video games, you will still enjoy video games. And for that matter, last I say here, I am still playing old games, I'm still playing StarCraft 2, I'm still playing old games that have always been good, right? Still good gameplay, yeah. But like, to me, that is an obvious thing for me, right? And I really do think so, because, for example, I'll say it here lastly, I really loved Octopath Traveler 2, a game I reviewed, of course, gave it 10 out of 10, right? To me, it's one of the best games this year. But very similar, right, to Unicorn Overlord is like a 2D sprite, you know, SNES graphic game, right? Amazing gameplay, great storyline, but mostly amazing gameplay. And I was like, have you guys played this game? I mean, honestly, right, you know, talk to my friends, my colleagues, right, you know, and like I have a lot of friends that like role-playing games, right? So they're like playing Diablo 4, like I mentioned, right? And they're like, oh, I love role-playing, blah, 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 and 4. And I'm just like, well, have you played this game? They're like, nah, it looks kind of old school, and but you're playing a 20-year-old Diablo game, basically. Right? I mean, with the exact same core loop and nothing new there, and you cycle the same thing over and over again. You barely explore anything. Like Diablo 2, right? I mean, obviously it has the same typical JRPG elements, but you're exploring a new game world and that one. And also, I don't know, guys, but for me, it's fine if I can beat the game in a few days. You know what I mean? That honestly, for me, is one of the biggest thing that I still have, you know, because I'm thinking about people in my age, right? They're complaining about, you know, oh, but I don't want to buy like a game I can beat in like a week or something, you know. Oh, it's only like 40-hour game time. I want to have this like infinite core loop. I'm like, really? Like, don't you have money? Don't you have a job? Like, I don't be that guy, but I think it's kind of funny. I'm like, but you can easily buy that. You can easily just buy a new game. Like, you have an actual job, you know. Like, why don't you just like buy a better game instead? I don't know, guys, but I think I come to that. I don't know. I think I come to a point in my life where I'm just like, I'd rather, you know, pay more, right? I'd rather buy these games, right? Like with Pikachu, I can beat them in like a week, right? And then I buy another one, right? I'd rather have that. I'd rather have, you know, a better gameplay experience, right? That I have to buy a new game each week, rather than having a boring game that I play every week. That being said, obviously I do understand. Okay, you know, I mean, I agree. Okay, if you literally buy one video game every week, okay, it's gonna be very costly. But you get my point. If you have like a full-time job and you only buy these like, you know, single-player games or whatever, right? They're much more enjoyable. You will beat them in a month, maybe, right? You know, because you have to work and so on. So it takes you a few weeks to beat it. Then you get the next game. Like for me, you're saying it. I think this year is great, right? Because it's been really a lot of great games that I can, you know, enjoy for a few months, right? Like 1 or 2 games, then I get a new game, and then I enjoy that few months, like it should be, right? You know. So in conclusion, no, I don't think the games are more boring today. You know, if you play the right games. That being said, though, I don't think there are a lot of games that are boring. So why are you playing them? Anyway, guys, please subscribe, slap button, have a great day.